All right, let's go ahead and pick up where we left off. This next section, we're still in the early years. And this next section of the early years is parents will always be the best example of everything learned in life. If you haven't figured this out yet, you are their prime example. I don't necessarily even want to get into things that are inherited from you, mannerisms, traits, various things like that, but there's spiritual things as well. And no one's going to be perfect before they have children. Most people aren't necessarily prepared to have children. It just kind of happens sometimes, whether you're going for it or not going for it. But no one's really prepared as a parent. So I say all that because you have to make sure that you are providing the best examples for your kids, no matter what. This is going to go well on in life. And that's why I'm saying belongs in the early years. Because again, the first 5 years of their life, they're going to be a sponge and mimic and learn all sorts of things from you. And I have heard so many different things from parents and stuff that they're like, oh my gosh, where did these kids learn this stuff from? Or how did they get it? And many times I'm like, have you looked at yourself? Like, do you not see where they're getting these things from? So I don't want to beat you up and I'm not trying to condemn you, but this is something, if you want good quality, I know it sounds funny to say this like they're a product, but if you want good quality children, be a good quality example. All right? So let's go into this. And this is going to rely heavily, of course, on the book of Proverbs. Hey, who would have thunk? I will try to go through this quickly and not spend a lot of time talking about it, just pointing out the verses, why this stuff is significant and why it's important to be an example. All right? The first thing that I want to bring up, since we're going to dive into the book of Proverbs, is something I have perceived. Take it or leave it. This is just stuff that I have perceived over many, many years of studying the Bible, is how significant and important fathers are. Now, this isn't a crack the whip and fathers, you need to step up and you need to do more. I mean, you probably should, to be perfectly honest. But what I really want to stress is that you are so significant into the guidance and direction that your child will go. I don't have all the statistics in front of me, but I have heard them throughout the many years, well before, or well after the Lord has downloaded this teaching to me and I've meditated on it for, over 20 years and whatnot. But listening to various psychologists and teachers and pastors and different people, there are many stats out there that show the significance and importance of dads and fathers in the lives of children. Not to say that mothers aren't important. I'm not trying to say that. But even the Bible puts a heavier weight on fathers. And I bring that up because we see that kids without fathers are more likely to end up in jail, more likely to end up doing drugs, more likely to not graduate high school, more likely to not go to college, more likely to not hold a job, more likely to obviously repeat the cycle and be an absentee father, or not even be a father, so to speak. Like, they may have had a father, but maybe the father was there or not present or whatever. The point is having a dad in your child's life is powerful and significant. So yes, I'm not trying to beat you up, dads and men, because I feel like we get beat up a lot in society. But you have to be proactive in your kids' upbringing and in their life. You can't just leave it for the moms. I know that's kind of the status quo and the social norm. And again, I'm not trying to knock moms, and I'm going to give you some verses to back up what I'm saying. But dads, yes, I know you work. Hopefully you're a good father that works and provides for their family, and you're a good husband and things of that nature. But please be proactive in your kid's life. Please make sure that you're not just cracking the whip and disciplining them. Please make sure that you're showing up and loving them and being affectionate and telling them how much you care and how much you love them. And again, I am jumping ahead of my notes. I am jumping all over my notes the whole time I'm doing this teaching because there's just so much in my head. I just want to spit it all out, but I'm going to try to go with the flow. So enough of that. Let me give you the evidence or what the Bible has to say. How about that? Okay? Fathers and mothers, I already said this, play a crucial role. And in the book of Proverbs, just in the book of Proverbs, 23 times the dad is speaking to the son. Now, obviously daughters are mentioned too, but this is a generalization. This is, again, if I didn't already say this in the beginning, the book of Proverbs was mostly written by Solomon, a man who was writing to his son, another man. But 23 times it says, my son, hear my voice, or my son, give attention to your father, or my son, listen to me this way. So 23 times the dad is pointing out instruction to the son. Only 3 times does it say, mothers, give attention to your mothers. Now, again, just as a side note, because now moms are like, oh, so we're just not important. Look, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm trying to emphasize how important dads are. That's my goal, and that's my emphasis in this section that we're going to get into, how important they are. Mothers have their significance, but when it comes to teaching and instructing and guidance of a child, fathers play a massively, massively big role in these things, okay? And even recently now, again, on a side note, I don't know the number of this statistic, but they have done many studies now and followed all of these single mothers and whatnot over the last 20, 30 years, and they have found that kids do far better in a single parent father home than they do in a single parent mother home. I'm not trying to be political. I'm not trying to get into all of that. All I'm simply saying is that, yes, fathers play a huge role. Okay, let's go into the word. I don't need to keep beating that up. I hope you hear what I'm saying. And I will show the significance of mothers here, but we'll get to that here in a moment. All right, so here's the 3 verses that mentions both father and mother for the child, for the son to be listening to. Okay, first one is Proverbs 1:8. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not ignore your mother's teaching. The next one, Proverbs 6:20. My son, comply with the commandment of your father, and do not ignore the teaching of your mother. The last one, where it's dually mentioned, Proverbs 23:22. Listen to your father who fathered you, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Now there are 20 more times where it says throughout the book of Proverbs, and I'm not going to go through those right now, my son, listen to your father, or my son, heed my instructions, or my son, do not, forget my voice, or what have you, which again is representative of a father teaching his son. Now, the next few verses, I want to show the result of your kids not listening. And I'm still going to default to the parent. A lot of people will say, oh, the kids are this, or the kids are that, or look at and in my mind, I'm like, you're the parent. You're the parent. You're leading by example. You're the one that's supposed to be guiding, instructing, correcting, disciplining, teaching, etc., etc. But this is why it's important that you understand this, because obviously we want our kids to be successful. We want them to listen, and we want them to be good members of society, etc., etc. These are the things that happens when they're not following our guidance, our instruction, our direction, or they're getting bad examples from us. Okay? So the first one is Proverbs 10:1. A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish son is the grief to his mother. The next one, Proverbs 15:20. A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish son despises his mother. It's not good. Proverbs 19:26. He who assaults his father and drives his mother away is a shameful and disgraceful son. Proverbs 20:20. He who curses his father or his mother, his lamp will go out in time of darkness. Sad. I've seen these things in real life. Friends, people I know, I've seen this stuff happen. A lot of these verses. Proverbs 28:24. He who robs his father or his mother and says there is no wrong done is the companion of a person who destroys. I certainly don't want to be somebody that's destroying things. I want to be somebody that is building and creating and encouraging and uplifting. So those are those few verses. So you can hear how significant that stuff is. But there's a handful more. Now, the blessings and the benefits that come as kids grow up to be obedient and to listen. I love this verse in the Old Testament. It says, obedience is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. What is that saying? Many of us can serve and do this and do that and do all these different things, but many times God is just calling us to do one simple task or one simple thing, and that's just to be obedient. It may not even be an act or service per se, maybe an act, something you do, but I'm just saying it may not be some big service or some big thing. It may just be, hey, sit with me, or just spend time with me, or go talk to that person, or whatever. But anyways, my point is getting our kids in this mentality, we have to lead by example. We want them to stay on the straight and narrow. We want them to stay on the right path. That means we got to continue to be proactive. I know I'm going to keep saying it because I want to drive that point home. But here's some of the benefits. Let's go into this. Exodus 20, verse 12. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be prolonged on the land which the Lord your God gives you. If you want long life, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. I know I already said this in one of the previous videos, but yes, I'm going to reemphasize it. Teach your kids this. Hey, do you want a long life? You want a healthy life? You want a blessed life? You want things to be successful? You want things to go well in your life? Honor your father and mother. It's very important. The next verse, we're going to go back to Proverbs. Proverbs 3, 1 and 2. My son, do not forget my teaching, but have your heart comply with my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. That's amazing. Who wants peace in their life? Who doesn't want a life full of problems and troubles? I'm not saying things won't happen and life won't happen. It will. We're going to have things. But man, I would love to have peace in the midst of the trials and in the midst of the circumstances and in the midst of everything that may go awry. Right? Something else I want to point out in this verse really quick. It says length of days and years of life. Those sound the same, but there is a little caveat. There is a slight nuance about this. Some semantics, if you will, at play. Length of days. How many of us, as we get older, it feels like the days go by so much faster? Like, where did the time go? I've talked to many adults about this. I'm like, man, when I was a kid, I feel like the days went on forever. You were in school and you're just like, oh my gosh, it's dragging forever and ever and ever. And then you would play till like 10 o'clock at night till lights came on, or street lights or whatever. You'd play till the sun went down, and it just felt like these long days. But then as you get to be an adult, you're like, man, the day goes by so fast, I have time for nothing. This is saying that your days will actually feel longer. You will have length of days, like you'll get more done in a day. Maybe I'm reading into that by saying you'll get more done in a day. Maybe you will or maybe you won't. But your days will feel lengthier. They'll feel like there's more to the day instead of just this, I just woke up and oh my gosh, it's already 6 o'clock. Where did the day go? Things like that. And then the second part, of course, is years of life. That's old age. That's simply referring to old age, having a long life. The Bible says, I want to say twice, that we are promised that, not promised, I shouldn't say promised, but that we have a maximum life capacity of 120 years. So, to my knowledge, nobody has lived past that length. Now, you may say, well, I don't want to live to be that old because, man, getting old sucks, or getting old this. And be careful with what you say. We've already talked about your power of your words. Shouldn't be saying these things anyways, as we're going to read some of these other verses. But point is yes, the Lord promises us long life. He wants us to have long life. This is a blessing that comes with honoring our parents, right? Being obedient, doing the things, just reading through the book of Proverbs and being wise, Anyways, so that's that. All right, moving on. Another benefit. This one's cool because this is actually towards the moms. Proverbs 31:28. And I'm just going to focus on the first half of the verse. Her children rise up and bless her. This is referring to the Proverbs 31 woman, the wise woman. And it's so, I would imagine, I've never asked a lot of older women this, but I would imagine most older women, when they see their children successful, when they see them doing well, and they kind of get that praise back, like they feel like, yep, job well done, like I raised a good kid or whatnot. But unfortunately, I feel like some mothers, they don't maybe see that, and then, it discourages them or whatnot. So I don't know. I can't speak to that because I'm not a mom. But yes, that's one of the benefits, again, of raising good kids. Let's go on. Ephesians 6:1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. This is New Testament now. Deuteronomy 5:16. Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, that your days may be long and that it may be well with you in the land which the Lord your God has given you. Again, so those are the benefits. Those are the things, but we have to lead by example. We can't just hound them with rules and not follow them ourselves. We can't be sayers and not doers. We can't do as I say, but not as I do. Things of that nature. It's very, very important. All right. So the next part of this section, as being a good example, something that the Lord showed me is that fathers are the ones that provide security and mothers are the ones that provide safety. God provides both. And we can see this all throughout the Bible in the Old Testament, in the book of Psalms. God's safety, security, protection, things of that nature. But what do I mean by that? Like, I'll give you an example. Playground for me is probably the biggest and best example of this. A good father is going to be there to be secure, right? They're not going to hover over them necessarily. So they're climbing up maybe this ladder or something. They could fall. Now the mother wants to be right there present. Okay, raise your hand if that mom. You shouldn't be that mom, but raise your hand if you're that mom. Right. She's trying to be like every little step. Well, you're not providing them any security. They're not building any kind of confidence or security in themselves because they already know that they've got a fallback plan. It doesn't matter if they slip or fall or whatever. You're going to be right there to catch them. That's safety. You would put the netting down below. You would put the pads down below because if they fall, maybe you're not right there present. You can't catch them. They want a safe landing. That's safety. Nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't build security. It doesn't build confidence. This is where dads come into play, and it's very important. The dad will be there, but he's not going to, be there right there. No, figure it out. Go ahead. He's going to be instructing them the whole time. Okay, put this foot here. Do this. He's not going to do it for them. He shouldn't be doing it for dads. You should be doing it for them. Yes, teach them once. Give them guidance one time, but then after that, you've got to let them be, right? And that's generally what dads are really good at. They're good at just letting them be and backing off. And the mom the whole time is like, what are you doing? You got to be right there. No. Let them figure it out. Well, what if they fall? Well, then they fall. Like, it's okay. They're not, at the end of the world, kids are resilient. They'll pick up after that. They'll bounce back. But that's all that I mean with that. And I use the playground example because you can go to any playground, anytime, anywhere, and look if the dad's present or if the mom's present or if both, and just see how the interaction goes. Just watch it. It's like clockwork. So, and something, not to pat myself on the back, but yes, my wife, she recognized this with me, with our girls. And like by the age of 2, our kids were like climbing up things they probably should not have been climbing up on. They were fearless. They were doing things they ought not to be doing. And we would go to the playground, even with some of our friends and whatnot, and they had kids around our age, and they were just babying them the whole time. They're like, oh, be careful, Buddha. And the dad was being like, acting like a mom too. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to let them be secure. You got to let them be confident. They're not going to, do you want them to get over fear? Do you want them to be able to go in life, navigating things and being able to solve things and whatnot? Anyways, and my friends were just like, what do you, oh my gosh. And Ray Lynn would always back me up, and she'd be like, no, they're good. Their dad taught them. Like, they're good. They're confident. They got it. Like, I'll be there if they fall, and I'll help them out if they got some tears, and I'll be there for the empathy and stuff. But no, they're good. And these parents were just like floored by how confident our kids were to be able to do things all over the playground at such a young age, where their kids were like skittish and scared. And again, I'm not patting myself on the back. That wasn't the intent, but that's how it should be. That's how it should be. Fathers provide security and mothers provide safety. Yeah, anyways, there's another story in my mind, but I don't need to bring it up. So let's go to a couple of these verses really quick. Psalm 103:13. This verse is, as the Father pities his children, so the Lord pities those who fear him. Now, we already talked about fearing the Lord, and you should teach kids the fear of the Lord. It's very important. But this just goes to show, like, our Heavenly Father, how he has pity on us, how he cares so deeply for us. So it's the same, fathers. It's so significant that, yes, we want to have pity on our kids, but we want to make sure that we are providing the security that they need, not just to, like, we don't want kids to be victims. We don't want to raise our kids to be victims, and fathers play a big role in that. Next verse, Psalm 91. This is the psalm that I was thinking about, how it's illustrating the Lord, how this entire thing, I don't need to read this whole thing. It's a long psalm. Well, I guess it's only 16 verses, but this is showing how God is both of these things, safety and security. And if you've never heard of Psalm 91, it's the safety psalm, the protection psalm, the psalm that God is all about protecting you from everything that could possibly happen, I suppose, in life. Should we read it? It's a great psalm. Let's go ahead and read it. I just won't give you the teaching on it. How about that? Psalm 91:1. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. You got to dwell in his presence to get these benefits. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in him I will trust. Surely he shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. He shall cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. You shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor of the destruction that lays waste at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near to you. Only with your eyes shall you look and see the reward of the wicked. Because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place, no evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways. In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. You shall tread upon the lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you shall trample underfoot. Because he has set his love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high, because he has known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. So I read all this to just show that this God encompasses both sides of the parent. And although we can't really do all of these things as parents, we can certainly try. But at the end of the day, children are a blessing and they're on loan from the Lord. We have to continue to be an example, model what the Father would do. How can we be that model for our children? And then, yes, still be able to leave the kids in our Father's hands and trust that he's going to protect and watch over them when we're not there to put a safety net down. When we're not there to say, hey, put this foot right here and you'll have success. Hey, do this thing, whatever, right? We have to now give some of this back to God. Not some of it, all of it, really, hypothetically. We should give all of it back to God and trust that God will protect our children in this regard. But yes, it is our job to provide these things for our kids. Now, let's go back to the significance of fathers, because the Bible still gives warnings about dads and if they aren't doing a good job. Because as a dad, it's easy to lose your patience. It's easy to get angry and mad and nitpick over little things that may or may not matter. Like something I do with my girls on a side note, having them sit up straight whenever they are sitting, even watching TV, no slouching, like when they're eating, when they're doing their homework, that good posture, sitting up. Like I see so many people, even adults, I'm just like, they're just hunched over. They just look like this the whole time. And maybe it's a health thing, whatever, but no, it comes from having good posture. But why is that important? Because you're focused, you're attentive, you're giving attention to whatever it is that you're doing. You're not being lazy, you're not slouched. For me, it embodies laziness. It embodies just I don't know, lazy. That's the only word that can come to my mind. Just laziness, just being lazy, tired, just, I don't know. So that's a pet peeve of mine. But anyway, I guess why I was saying that is because we can nitpick our kids on a lot of things and then they get discouraged. So we've got to make sure that we're uplifting them. We've got to make sure that we're going to do these kinds of things. And again, I'm going to get into some of more of this practical application stuff. I'm going to talk about these things because it is so important that we're focusing on the positive and focusing on these things. So that's why I bring these verses up, okay? So Ephesians 6:4. And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Who is it telling this to do? The fathers. The fathers. You play such a big role, but you don't want to provoke your children to wrath. We'll get to this in a moment. In proper discipline, proper correction, focusing on the positives, extending grace, all that stuff. We're going to get to that here in a minute. Next verse. Colossians 3:21. Fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. I've seen this so many times. I've seen this with some of our friends and their children and stuff, and I can see they're at an early age. They're not even 5, and the kids are disheartened and discouraged because the parents are being too hard on them, because there is no grace, there is no patience. There's just the iron fist, and that's awful. I'm sorry, but that's awful. And I don't want to get ahead. We'll talk about that. But fathers, this is for you. This isn't talking about mothers. This is talking about fathers. Genesis 1:26 and 27. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on this earth. Verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Why am I bringing this up about the man? Because I haven't seen a single example of this. The way a child, or an adult, I should say, child, adult, whatever, when I was in Bible school, and a lot of these people, they were college-age kids or students, people, adults, whatever. You can always tell how a person would interact with God, the Heavenly Father, based on how their relationship was with their earthly father. And I could see this across the board, time and time again. And that's why I bring these verses up, because man was made in the image of God. And then God separated woman from the man. The people get confused on this, and I'm not trying to get into theology over this right now. It says, God made them in the image of God. He created him male and female. So people assume that he made Eve right then and there. That's not what this is talking about. Is that when mankind was made, both the feminine and the masculine was all combined into one. And then God separated the feminine out of Eve. Be that as it may, we can see throughout the Bible, all throughout the Bible, of God our Father. Now in the Old Testament, Father wasn't as illustrated. It wasn't used as much, even though he was our Heavenly Father. But it wasn't until Jesus showed up that he was bringing much more illustration to the name Father. Abba, Father. That actually, Paul wrote that, but Jesus, in this manner, therefore pray, our Heavenly Father. So he really put emphasis on focusing on God as our Father. And in the Old Testament, you can see how man is made in the image of God, because he has all of these emotions. You can see where he's loving and kind and tender and forgiving and gracious and all these different things. But then you can see where God is full of wrath and destroying his people and killing all these tribes and these different sects and whatnot. And he's going to town. He gets jealous of times. And you're just like, dude, are you insecure? What is all this stuff? No, it's just he's got emotions, because as the same emotions we have, we can see all of those emotions pan out from the Lord. And why I say this is because as a male figure, as a man, we were created in the image of God in his likeness, in his being, through our words, through our actions, through how we just carry about ourselves. And that's why there's such a heavy emphasis, and that we are held to a higher standard. Not just with our kids, of course, but just in everything in life. But yes, it boils down to we will be the ones that hold account for our kids. I don't think, in my opinion, that you're going to see this heaviness laid upon the mothers as much as you are the fathers. And all these fathers that are absent, all these fathers that aren't present, all these fathers that, had bad examples, whatever, like, you have the power to turn it around. You have the power with your words. You have the power with your actions. You have the power with just your life, just being present, as I keep saying. So that's why I bring this up, because it's so important that we recognize as men, we were made in the image of God, in his likeness. And yes, God got angry. Yes, he lost his patience. Yes, he had his moments, but he's also a God of loving kindness and tender mercies. He's a God of grace. He's a God of patience. He's a God from everlasting to everlasting. And he just wants to show how much he loves us. I've said this recently. I've heard this quote, and I've said it recently. On a side note, you won't understand how much God loves you until you understand how much he loves his son. And that's the kind of love, as fathers, that we need to be showing our children. How much we love and adore our children. It's so important as fathers to adore and honor and love your children unconditionally. I don't know where I'm going with all this. I'm kind of sidetracked, so let me come back. That part was just how extremely important fathers are. I have this next note. This is going to be a lot of storytelling. Not my storytelling, but storytelling in the Bible. So I'm just going to talk about them. I don't want to look up all the verses, but they're there and you can look them up. And so something that I've perceived from reading the Old Testament, because I asked the Lord many, many years before I had kids, and even as I've had kids, and maybe that's where I was going with this, maybe the Holy Spirit was leading me into this, but I asked the Lord, I'm like, are there any examples in the Old Testament of a good father? Because I've heard many, many sermons, and people will talk about these fathers and these examples, and I can go down the list. And I've listened to them, and boy, I just have issues with their take or their perception on these fathers. They talk about how Abraham was a good father. They talk about how Jacob was a good father, how Isaac was a good father, and this, that, and the other. They talk about how Job was a good father, how all these fathers, David, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't see that. I don't see that. I don't see that at all. And it's interesting because, as I was just sharing, like, God is the epitome of love and a perfect, loving father. But we can see, as in the Old Testament, he, dare I say, made mistakes, because the Bible does say 3 times that God repented in the Old Testament, and people have beef with me on that. I'm not trying to get into that. But that means even God was like, yep, I messed up. I made a mistake. And we can learn from this as fathers. But the other thing is like, we can learn from these examples of fathers that didn't do a great job. Let me go through all of these various examples of what I mean by this. Now, I used to have one of Abraham, and fresh one's not coming to mind, but we could go all the way back to, let's go to Adam and Eve. I don't know how they would have had any teaching or instruction or knowledge whatsoever. They didn't even have the Bible. They didn't have the written word. They were walking with God, which is pretty stinking awesome. But then after that, I don't know. They just, all of a sudden, then we hear about Cain and Abel, and the very first thing that happens is Cain murders his brother. Where were the parents? Where were you at, Dad? Like, I don't know. I probably have to give a lot of grace to this, but I'm just like, yeah, where was Dad at? Where were you at, Dad? Well, I'll tell you from my example and again, this is story time, okay? So just run along with me. I'm going to give you lots of stories in the Bible why I think this way and why I believe this. Okay, so story time. So my dad, when I had a brother, and when we would get into fights, maybe not to the point of murdering each other, although I'm sure that it could have escalated had our dad not stepped in. My dad was always like, you're both to blame. You're both at fault. It doesn't matter who started it. You're both going to be punished. You're both going to be, corrected. So that's how my dad saw it. Now, again, God, because of free will, God can't just mingle and just intervene and just stop these bad things from happening. I'm not trying to get into that crazy theology either of why does bad things happen. But that's the point of all this. We have to take examples from God, and then we have to take examples from the Bible of people that were doing it wrong, right? So we can learn from that and how we can be better at that. The Bible doesn't give a lot of explicit instruction to dads and to be like, Dad, here's what you do in this situation, and Dads, here's what you do in this situation, and Dads, here's how you do this. It doesn't really go into a lot of that. And again, that's why I say read the book of Proverbs. There's a lot of wisdom, but there's not maybe a lot of practical hands-on skills in certain situations. But yes, with Cain and Abel, where was Dad? Why did he separate them? Why did he bring this up? Was this something that was already going on? Did he not perceive this already? Maybe he's just new to this whole thing, which clearly he was. But I don't know. I can't answer that. So I'm not sure, And we can see along the lineage of Adam, because he was, 900 years old or something like that, the various sons and things that he had, it just doesn't seem like all of it panned out well. Some of it didn't really pan out well. Okay? That's just my take. Just my take. You could argue with me if you want. You could show me in scripture where I'm missing something, but that's just my take. And again, fast forward. I would say Enoch, it took him how long? 300 years? I think we read earlier, 300 years, Enoch, before he started walking with God, and then he had his son Methuselah. I guess Enoch was a good dad, I suppose. I don't know. There's not really much story in between any of that. So I don't know on Enoch, except that he started walking with God, and then maybe he had good instruction and naming his kid and raising his kid, and his kid lived to be very, very long. So maybe there's something to that. But then fast forwarding, I think of Isaac. So Isaac, right, he had Jacob and Esau. And he, in his old age, ended up blessing the wrong person. There was clearly favoritism at play. In that situation, there was clearly that favoritism. And I guess that's something with Abraham too. You see this with a lot of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of favoritism with their kids. And that's not good as a dad. As a dad, you should never show favoritism whatsoever. And I can honestly say this about my dad. I can't say that about my mom, but I can say that about my dad. I don't think my dad loved my brother more than me, and I don't think he loved me more than my brother. And I'd be curious to hear what my brother would have to say about that, honestly. But you cannot show favoritism whatsoever. Moving over to Jacob. Jacob, that one's a bigger one, and you can see these things manifest. I'm not even getting into the whole, I mentioned this at the beginning of this about spiritual things, mannerisms and traits of your own self that pass on. If you were an alcoholic, there's a good chance your kids are going to be an alcoholic. If you were addicted to pornography, there's a good chance your kids are going to be addicted to pornography. If you were, an adulterer, there's a good chance. So as a father, we've got to live by example and do these things, But you can see this when we get to David, the whole lust thing. But this actually started, if I had to say, this probably started with Judah. It's just my 2 cents. I don't want to get into it heavily, but yeah, Jacob, he reaped what he sowed in a lot of his life. But then fast forward, when he started having kids, he had kids with the other wife. And was it Leah? I think it was Leah. Point is once he had Joseph, he makes a colorful coat for him. He puts his coat on him and shows that this boy is not going to have to work. The other boys, they got to work. Judah, you got to work. All you other guys, you got to work. So, yeah, you can see that with Joseph and what ended up happening in his life. And I believe the Lord had to humble Joseph. That's why he ended up in the situation that he was and why he got sold into slavery and all these different things that happened. But there's something else that is missing about Jacob that a lot of people don't see. He had a daughter, Dinah. And you know what happened to her? She got raped. And you know what ended up the sons did? The brothers stood up for her sister. But where was Dad? Dad was too afraid. I feel like Jacob had a fear issue, but he was too afraid to go and defend his daughter. What kind of role model are you as a father for your daughter if you're not saying something this traumatic happened to you and I'm not going to go fight for you and probably murder the person that did this to you? I'm not giving you permission to murder somebody. We have courts and laws and things like that. That's not what I'm getting at. But the point is he did nothing. He did nothing. And the sons came to him and they're like, Dad, hey, what are you going to do about this? And he's like, I don't know. Do whatever, I guess. Do what what? You're in charge. He did nothing. He was a bad father. I'm sorry. He was not a good father. He really wasn't. And so the boys, the brothers took vengeance and they handled their business for their sister. Good on you, brothers. But moving on, like people talk about Job. Job is an interesting one too, because with Job, everybody's like, he was sacrificing, like he was doing the ritual and the thing every day for his kids. Like, how is that not a great father? Because he was hands off. You can see this with a lot of wealthy parents. They are super hands off with their kids and they just spoil them or give them what they need. They want a better life for them. And again, nothing wrong with that as long as it's done correctly and properly and still being present and guiding and directing and instructing, not just hoping for the best. But Job was very wealthy. It's clearly obvious he was very wealthy. His kids had their own homes. They were partying. They were doing their thing. And he was not present. Clearly, he let them grow up however they wanted because of what they were doing. And so he was making these sacrifices and atonement to the Lord based on what he thought his kids might have done wrong. Why didn't you go correct them? Because they're adults now. I can't. You are their father 24/7. It doesn't matter that 18 is when they leave the house or 13 is their bar mitzvah or whatever. None of that matters. You are their parent forever. And you can still be guiding and directing them. And yes, there probably comes to a point where you got to be hands off and you got to trust their decisions and whatnot. But dude, I've told this to my daughters, and my dad was like this with us till the day he died. We were teenagers. He was actively involved. If we did something that was still wrong or whatever, he didn't just leave it up to happenstance or hope that the law would, police would pull us over or whatever. No, he was actively scolding us. He was still actively involved. Now, it wasn't as hard. He didn't have a paddle anymore. He wasn't whipping us with his belt or the paddle or whatnot. But he was still on our cases. He was still making sure we knew he was the boss and he was in charge. So there's not a time that this comes as a father that you're not going to be proactive in your kids' lives. Anyways, but with Job, that was his thing. I don't think he was involved in their kid's life. He didn't know what they were doing. So you should be involved. You should know. I'm hoping and praying that as my girls get older, because girls are a lot different with this stuff. I mean, boys don't talk, I guess, either, but girls are going to want to go to their mom and be emotional. But I'm hoping that my girls, they know that they can come to me, that they can trust me and share anything with me. We'll get into the practical application. I know I keep saying this, but we're going to get into this stuff, the correction and discipline, because yes, you don't want to be so harsh that, if everything that they do turns into, did you do this thing? Well, now I'm going to scold you and I'm going to spank you. Yes, have rules in place and have discipline in place, of course. But if every little thing you want them to be honest, but if every time that they're honest, then some punishment comes out of it, they're not going to want to be honest anymore. And they're not going to want to tell you the truth anymore. And they're not going to want to even tell you things because they know that something bad is going to come of it. My girls know that when they tell me something honest, the punishment will be less severe depending on what it was. And sometimes it will be just completely overlooked because it's not significant. Remember I was telling you about nitpicking. It's not that important. Hey, did you eat a banana downstairs? Yes. Okay. Thank you for telling me the truth. I appreciate that. You've got to appreciate the parents skip over the positive affirmation. The parents skip over the positive part. You've got to focus on the positive. You will hear this out of my mouth. I'm always encouraging and positive to my girls, even if I am correcting and disciplining them. I am always focusing on something that they did correctly. Let them hear that they are doing something correctly. Take that nugget and run with it. They've got to know they are doing something right by you. Otherwise, they will feel discouraged and feel defeated, and they will not want to keep trying. You don't want to put them in that position. Sidetracked on a side note. But yes, did you eat the banana downstairs? Yes. What is the rule? Don't eat downstairs. Okay, go upstairs right now, 5 minutes, and then you can go back downstairs. You do not eat food downstairs. The next time I catch you, I will spank you. You see what I'm saying? I wasn't trying to be as harsh. Was it that significant? She told me the truth. So I'm going to lighten the load. Go ahead upstairs, finish your banana or whatever. If you're still eating, go finish it upstairs. And you now lost privilege for a few minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. And then you can go back downstairs. But the next time I catch you eating, that's the rule. Okay? But And people say, what about tomorrow? Didn't you catch them the next day tomorrow? Yes, and that's very well, and that could happen. So stick to your guns. We'll get into that. Like, if you say something, you got to stand behind it. Anyways, back to why I think fathers haven't done a good example. That's with Job. So I want to jump over to David, because David's another big name that's thrown out there. And David, like, we just need to look at some of the mistakes he made in life, and then he had his kids, like Absalom, like, pretty much grew up wanting to kill his father, if I'm not mistaken. Solomon was the only benefit of all that, but he was birthed out of adultery or something, like, I don't know. And again, David was so hard pressed and just passionate about serving the Lord. His time, I would say David's biggest thing was like his work and time, his relationship with God. Not that that's bad, but he didn't give any time to his kids like he ought to have. And again, but that comes to probably his father. Like, think about it. He was modeling. Remember what I said at the beginning? Like, people will always, the relationship with the Lord will always model how their relationship was with their father. And so in David's situation, it was a little opposite, because he had this close-knit relationship with the Lord, but he had no close relationship with his father, it would seem. Like, his father didn't even care about him. Like, he was the runt of the bunch, you know? But then you see that play out in David's life with his kids. He was treating his kids kind of the same way he was treated by his father. Instead of taking the relationship that he had gotten from his heavenly father, which could not be taught or learned, somehow it just, he just got a hold of it somehow. He didn't pass these things on to his kids. But then people will say, well, Solomon was the wisest out of the bunch. Yeah, I mean, but Solomon made a choice, and God saw this in him. I don't think it was something that necessarily came from David. But anyways, take that for what it's worth. There's other examples in the Old Testament, but when I hear a lot of this, when people say, yeah, go to the Old Testament for good examples of fathers, I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't see it. Now, I will say with Solomon, he wrote the book of Proverbs, obviously, so we can glean a lot from that. And I should know this. I don't know his situation or his kid's situation. I'm not sure how his kid ended up or how that panned out or what happened with all of that. I actually couldn't tell you how that. I should know this story, and I don't know it offhand. But all that to say, and I know I'm getting ahead, is that fathers, you're very important. And fathers, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You are. But please be patient with your kids. God is patient with us. Please be kind towards your kids. God is kind towards us. Please show affection towards your kids. Please constantly tell them how much you love them. Please constantly tell them that you are pleased with them. Please constantly speak life over them and over everything that they do. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to do these things. But you have the ability to guide and direct that with your words. The other thing about us being made in the image of God, if I haven't already shared this, I think I did. I'm going to share it again. Our words. God created the heavens and the earth with his words. We have that same ability to speak with our words, to encourage, to bless, to move, to guide, to direct. And I know I say this, and I can say this with all sincerity and confidence, that my girls, I never speak death or any discouragement over my kids. Ever. Ever. And I will even do it in such a way that I'm like, did you not tell the truth just now? Instead of saying, did you lie to me just now? Which one sounds harsher? Which one sounds worse? Did you not tell the truth to me right now? Did you just lie to me just now? I know it's a play on words, but I'm overemphasizing the positive. You see, in the Old Testament, there was no such thing as a curse. It was a negative blessing, which it's weird. But it's basically the example I just gave you. It's basically taking a blessing, but saying it in a negative way. That's what a curse was considered. So when I'm speaking over my kids, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not focusing on these evil tendencies or these sinful tendencies. I am focusing on the positive. I know my kids mess up, and I know they have issues. Like, hey, we're not going to be angry. You kids are gentle and kind. You're compassionate. And that's what I say instead. And that's why it's so important that you understand this. As fathers, you have the power, and mothers too, but you have the power and ability to speak these things over your kids. If there's something that they are doing that you want them to do opposite, yes, you can scold them into oblivion. You can spank them into oblivion. You can discipline them into oblivion. Fine. I don't think you should do that. Or you could focus on the 1% that they're doing right and speak that thing that you want to see happen. I will constantly speak over my kids, and my wife knows this, and I've got her doing it. Okay, what are they having a problem with? Ari has a hard time paying attention. Ari, you are very focused. You are a focused little girl. You have great focus and great attention span. You have this. I know you have this. I know it's inside of you. You have this. What am I saying? I'm not saying, Ari, you are ADD, you are ADHD, you can't focus if your life depended on it. That's negative. That's a curse. That's a negative blessing by saying it that way. Or I'm speaking a blessing over. You have great attention, little girl. Like when you focus on things, you can focus really well. And I just need you to use that same focus on this thing over here. Do you see the difference? Do you see how that plays out? Zoe, don't lie, baby girl. Lying, we know that Satan is the author of lying. We want nothing to do with the devil, right? Right? You don't want to, right? You don't. So, but you know what? When you tell me the truth, I love it. I love when you tell me the truth, little girl. Like it warms my heart so much when you tell me the truth. Because I want to listen to more of what you have to say. You've got great ideas, and when you tell the truth, man, those ideas just flow. And those things just happen, and people want to listen to you. You see the difference? You see what I'm now saying and promoting in my child's life? Instead of saying, you're a liar. Like, stop lying, okay? I'm going to beat your little butt because you keep lying to me, okay? Lying is of the devil, and you are of the devil. You are acting like Satan right now. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? Life and death are in the power of the tongue. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. Speak life over your children. Fathers, speak life. Guide, direct, nurture, speak. Speak what you want to see. Speak what you want instilled inside of them. It is so important. So the next section in the early years I'd like to address or focus on is what I would say traits to really focus. Like things that you really want to focus and bring out in your children. Because in my opinion, and this is a short list, I'm sure there's a lot more you could do. But in my opinion, if you can get these traits working for your children in the early years of their life, the rest of their life is going to go extremely well, in my opinion. And it's just 3 things. And oddly enough, one of them is not the fruit of the Spirit, which is weird to me, but it might be, maybe meekness. But if possible, this is what I would say. Teach them patience, humbleness, and self-control. These are very good attributes and traits to focus on in the early years of a child's life. And let me just point out a few verses and then we'll wrap this section up. So the first one I'm going to bring up is Matthew 18, 2 through 6. Now I know I already said, yes, the fruit of the Spirit, there's 9 of those things, and that's a lot. And I still think many Christians have a hard time enough just focusing on all 9 of those. But again, in the early years, I think there's these, in my opinion, would be the most important. Just my opinion, though. So, okay, let's do the first one, and let's start in Matthew 18. This whole chapter is actually really good. So we're probably going to bring up Matthew chapter 18 several times, but in this context, we're just going to go Matthew 18, and I believe it's verse 2 through 6. And he called a child to himself and set him among them, and said, truly I say to you, unless you change and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. So whoever will humble himself like this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it is better for him to have a heavy milestone be hung around his neck and that he be drowned in the depths of the sea. We're going to focus on verse 6 later. We'll come back to that. But I wanted to focus on the middle part where he says, you need to change and be like a child. Be humble like a child. And it's odd that he says that because I don't know that children are really that humble. Maybe they are as they're first growing up because they don't know a lot. They don't have a lot of wisdom, a lot of understanding. So they're learning. And that to me would show humility because you're constantly asking questions. You're constantly trying to learn. Even if you know something, you're still trying to better yourself, or you're still trying to put yourself under someone, submit yourself to someone, or what have you. And that requires humility and humbleness. So yes, if you can teach this to your child, I think it's a phenomenal thing. Like I deal with this with Aricella, and many times I'm teaching her something and she's like, Dad, I got it. Dad, I got it. Dad, I know. Dad, I can figure it out. Dad. And I keep telling her, I was like, baby, listen to me. Please trust me on this. You have to humble yourself and just learn. Even if you think you know it, even if you think you have it, if there's someone that is trying to teach you or someone that is over you in authority, take the time to just listen and ask questions for clarity and understanding. You may be the smartest one in the room, but you don't have to appear or show yourself that way. So yes, that's why I think it's such a good trait. Let's go with 1 Peter 5, and I have 5 and 6. And this says, you younger men likewise be subject to your elders, and all of you clothe yourself with humility toward one another, because God is opposed to the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. I can't stress this verse enough just in life. Understanding that God gives grace to the humble. So if you can instill this in your child, we talked about the fear of the Lord. We talked about knowing his love. We talked about all of these other things, and they are all very, very important. This is critical. I always want to walk in God's goodness, his favor, and his grace. But what this verse is telling me is that he opposes the proud. Like on a side note, I don't even know if I've mentioned this yet. When the dove came down, and I might address this later. So again, I'm probably getting ahead. If I haven't addressed, I'm probably getting ahead. But on the side note, even when God was talking about his son Jesus, and he gets baptized in the river, and he comes up, and then the dove comes upon him, or the Holy Spirit falls upon him like a dove, God says something very specific. He says, this is my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased. God hates pride so much that he doesn't even use the phrase, I'm proud of my son. Again, I'm not trying to knock you if you say that to your kids. I make it a point not to say that to my kids. I make it a point not to use the word pride or, pride, proud, whatever, in any kind of phrasing with my children. I always say, I am very pleased with you, or you must be really pleased with yourself and how you handle this, or whatever it may be. I make sure I don't use the word pride or proud, because again, clearly God hates it so much, he didn't even use it with his own son. So, end side note. But yes, back to my point, God opposes the proud, he gives grace to the humble. It's self-explanatory. Teach your kids to walk in humility. Teach your kids to be humble. And teach them that grace will follow them if they just stay humble. Yeah. All right. Next verse. This one is patience. James 1, 2 through 4. Count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces what? Patience. And let patience have its perfect work, so that you may be what? Perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Imagine, I want to go all over the place with this. The amount of adults I see that have no patience, even up in the upper late ages, 70s, 80s, and they still have no patience. I'm floored by these things because I see how it affects their life, how it affects their mentality, how it affects their surroundings and the people that they intermingle with. I still think I have a long way to go with patience. And most people that know me feel that I'm a very patient person. But believe me, put me with anything IT or computers, and I'm very knowledgeable of this stuff, but when it doesn't work, I really lose my patience. Put me anything to do with like carpentry or craftsmanship or like working on cars or whatever, fixing things or what have you. This was not a trait that I seem to inherit. I learned it and I've got an understanding of it, but it's not a skill set I think I'm great at. I can do it. But man, when those things not go well for me, I really lose my patience. But in many, many other ways of my life, people would say, oh, you're a really patient person. But why am I saying all this? Not to pat myself on the back, but I'm simply saying patience is huge, because what these verses are saying is that you're going to go through trials and tribulations and temptations and various things in your life. It's bound to happen. You know, we live, we breathe, we go through life. And what this is saying is that if you let patience have its perfect work, see, many of us will try to get out of the trial and the storm, which I'm not saying you shouldn't, but we don't learn the lesson from it. We keep going around the same mountain, so to speak, right? Figure out whatever it is you're supposed to learn in that trial, that temptation, that tribulation, whatever it may be, and get the patience from it so that you know that next time that thing happens, again, I'm speaking to myself when it comes to tools, the next time that happens, you can just, okay, it's fine. I'll get through this. It's not a big deal, right? But we make it a big deal. Anyways, I'm kind of preaching to myself on that one. But my point is again, I instill this in my children heavily. And I keep telling them, girls, please be patient. I promise it will go well. I promise it will work out. Just be patient. Wait. For kids, that is like impossible to ask them to wait. If you put a cookie in front of them, right? There's people that have done these tests, like psychological tests with kids, and they'll take like a treat and they'll say, okay, there's one cookie here, but you can have 3 cookies if you wait. Now, I know patience isn't always necessarily waiting, but it's the same, I don't know, kind of the same. And the kids, you can go look this up. The kids that take the cookie, that don't have self-control, which of course is one that we're going to go here next, but if they don't have patience or self-control and they take the first cookie, they lose out on the 3 cookies after, whatever the time frame is. But they found that the kids that will wait will usually have a better outcome in life. Isn't that astounding to me? That's remarkable. But the kids that have the impulses, they tend to have more problematic life. So keep that in mind. Teach your kids patience. Teach them these things. So let's go to the next one. And this is Proverbs 20:11. It is by his deeds that a boy distinguishes himself, if his conduct is pure and right. Let's read another version of this. Even a child, this is the New King James, even a child is known by his deeds, whether what he does is pure and right. And I would suggest this verse, I'm probably out of order with some of these, I would suggest this verse only simply because when you can tell when a kid is patient, you can tell when they're doing the right thing, you can tell when they walk in humility, you can tell when they have self-control. And parents will super, super respect this. Like you can see it. Again, I go back to my example with the grocery store with my girls. I get compliments many, many times. People are like, man, your kids are so well behaved. And I don't think that they are at times. I think that many times I have to take them to an aisle and correct them because they are not listening or what have you. But be that as it may, this is telling me that the things that I'm instilling in my children, it's going to be evident and it's going to be obvious. People will notice it. So that's why these things are important to me. Let's go over to Proverbs 16:32. Oh, this is regarding self-control and or anger. I didn't mention anger. I feel like that goes in self-control. Like I said, there's a lot of things that we could go over, but I feel like these are key because they kind of overlap a lot of the other traits or attributes. Proverbs 16:32. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. Again, I've seen this time and time again. I myself have exercised this many times in my life. I can honestly say I've never been in a fight. I have had many people sucker punch me. I've been headbutt before. My nose has been cracked and it's been broken a few times. And I'm not saying that's always the right thing to do. But I can honestly say, knowing my father and how he would have responded, that wasn't an attribute I wanted to instill in myself. I don't know that anybody taught me this, to be perfectly honest. I feel like this is something the Lord taught me. Now, can I stand my ground? I believe I could, but I've never fought. So, hey, I don't know. Maybe there's no truth to that. I've trained myself, but nevertheless, my point is that I wish I knew the phrase. You learn this in martial arts and in like MMA and fighting and things like that. The phrase basically goes like, a person that knows their limits, like knows what they're capable of doing, but withholds it properly, is better than the person who's like lashing out in anger or frustration or whatever. Because that person has now put self-control, he's put his anger down, and he in his heart and head, he knows he could probably obliterate them. And again, there's many times in my life that I've had that opportunity. I don't know that that's an opportunity to where I could have probably really inflicted a lot of pain on somebody, but I chose not to do it. So again, self-control goes a long way in a child's life. And you can see with temper tantrums, that goes along with patience, of course, but that's the temper tantrums thing, the throwing the fit, like all that stuff. That needs to be corrected. They need to learn self-control. It's important. You can't be lashing out in anger, because how many of us have seen adults, especially in this day and age, where they are literally screaming and crying and throwing themselves on the ground and acting so foolish and so crazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, nobody taught them any kind of self-control whatsoever. Like, anyways, okay, next verse. I don't need to beat that up, but no pun intended. Here's another one about self-control. Proverbs 25. Notice I'm reading a lot of these from the book of, you guessed it, Proverbs. Proverbs 25:28. Whoever has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down without walls. Yes, this is anger, but yes, I see it more as self-control. Same thing, same example I was just giving you, just using another verse. You need to be able to rule your spirit and your mind and your heart. Those three things were a three-part being. We need to control and be in control of those things. God has given us the ability to do it. We can seek his love, but as parents, we can correct it. And that's what we're going to get into here in the next section. How to properly correct, all the practical application, all the stuff you've probably been waiting to hear. We're going to get into that into the next section, because this is all part of the early years. But anyways, so hopefully all of that made sense. I think I read all my verses. I'm going through it. Patience, humbleness, pure deeds, slow to anger, self-control. So yeah, all of that is good stuff. And I think you can see why. So I don't need to rehash that, but try to instill those traits and those attributes into your children. When you see them losing their patience, when you see them acting out in anger, when you see them have no self-control, and when you see them acting prideful, correct that. Nip that stuff in the bud immediately. All right? Cool. Let's wrap that up and let's go into the next section.